I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane. Today is Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. And today's a special day. We're doing a town hall in partnership with our colleagues and friends, leaders, elders in the community associated with the Stairstep Foundation. The Stairstep Foundation, in association with my company, McFarlane Media, working together to look at some developments in our community that we want our people to be aware of and involved in. We want to bring our voices forward in decision making that is in the arena of public policy. We're talking today about the construction considerations for Highway 252 and I-94 that goes through Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, and North Minneapolis. And the idea, though, is to recognize this route, these changes affect African and African American communities, and we want to talk about that today. Let me first recognize my co-host and partner and leader in this project, Brother Alfred Babington Johnson, the CEO of Stairstep. Brother Alfred, how you doing, man?
I'm doing nicely, Al. How are you?
I am well, excited that we are here today and glad to have this conversation. I think what we're doing is so critical, so important, so necessary. So I'm pleased to be here.
Amen. Well, thank you for all that you bring to this and every table that you sit at.
Well, we wanted to start off, if our colleagues hear from MNDOT, I'm not sure if they're on board yet, but they'll be coming momentarily if they're not here yet. But we wanted to give kind of an overview of what we're talking about MNDOT's approach to engaging community around decisions on the I-94 Highway 252 project. But let me start with you, Babington. Maybe you'll give an overview.
Well, I think kind of the larger picture here, Al, is that organizations such as MNDOT or the Minnesota Department of Health or the Minnesota Education Department or any of the agencies that have been mobilized to deal with the issues of our community are responsible for trying to have an outcome that is in the best interest of the community. And I think what has been concluded by MNDOT in particular, hopefully others, is that there has not been the level of participation by certain communities as there should be. And so in this particular project that we've been involved with them now, I think, Al, really for about a year and a half, some of the senior leadership in MNDOT, and at that time, even the commissioner, determined that it would be important to try to find some imaginative ways to engage African and African American communities. The particular project we're talking about, the 252 I-94 project, happens to run through some of the areas that are most populated by African and African American people. That is to say, Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, and North Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. And so I think people like Jerome Aiken and Christina and April, folks, and John Thompson, different people at MNDOT said, how can we make this different? We don't have a good history on this, but how can we do something different? They decided, Al, to reach out to us to see if we could find a way to do something different.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. Today at Town Hall, we're calling it the Stairstep Highway 252 I-94 Town Hall. And we're talking about an important arena of decision making, about a process for engaging our people, our voices in that. Let me say, first of all, before we continue, thanks to those of us who are joining us here on KFAI on the radio or anywhere around the world at kfai.org. I want to also mention that we are appreciative of the technology that lets us connect with people, not only on radio, but visually, digitally through Black Press USA, their YouTube channel. We're also being streamed live to the Black Press USA Facebook channel. We are also distributing this signal live, but also available on archive afterwards at the Insight News YouTube channel, YouTube, Facebook page, Insight News' LinkedIn, and Insight News' Twitter. And our goal is just to create as many ways as possible for us to be with each other and talk to each other about important things of the day. So, Babington, you've assembled this. Go ahead.
I think Aaron is here, Al.
Aha, bring Aaron in. Hey, Aaron, how you doing?
Good morning or good afternoon. How are you doing? Sorry, I was a little
good.
late.
So we were just about to praise the MNDOT for the visionary leadership and engagement, but I'll hold up on that and ask you to just take a minute to talk about kind of the high level. What's the makeup of the corridor that you guys are looking at, and what is the intention of MNDOT in engaging community, and what kind of experience is there with us or with others up to date? Let me say that Aaron Tagg is the MNDOT West Area Engineer. We may be being joined as well, hopefully, by Christina Perfetti. And if she joins us, she's the West Area Coordinator for the MNDOT Metro District. Glad to be working with you guys and glad that you're here, Aaron. Take a minute.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thank you for having us. We are really enjoying our relationship here, and it's a growing relationship. And we're trying something new here with the 252 and I-94 project, and trying to see how we can have really authentic conversations about the corridor, and really get intentional and authentic engagement from communities that, and honestly, in the past we just haven't been able to reach and be able to get that valuable feedback that we really need for these important projects. So the project that we're looking at is the I-94 and 252 project. It follows I-94 and Highway 252, essentially from downtown Minneapolis up to I-694 in Brooklyn Park. As we look at what we can do for the corridor, we're really looking at what we start with is developing, what is a problem that we're trying to fix. And as we've looked at, this corridor, we're really trying to fix the safety problem that's out there. We know that it's difficult for people to cross 252, especially in Minneapolis on I-94. We know that there's spots where there's a large gap between crossings, and so we're looking at fixing that. And then, we also know that, people have trouble getting around, whether it's by car or transit, biking and walking. And so we want to make improvements to that as well.
That's a great overview. Let me then come back to Brother Alfred Babington Johnson. Babington, if it's okay to call you that on the air, Babington.
Please call me Babington.
So you've done this marvelous work of always trying to build community, engage the voices, the spirit, the knowledge in our community in problem solving. You've done that again here with the Leadership Council. Talk about that and introduce the people that are here today.
Okay. So let me just, as a frame, Al, say, just as Aaron has indicated, and Jerome, as we've had private conversations, this project for us started the same place it started for MNDOT, a recognition that African and African-American communities are not and have not been at the table to participate in matters of critical importance to us. So as we were engaged by MNDOT, our thought was, first of all, we need to raise awareness in our community. We need to create tools that would allow, and processes that would allow the facilitation of engagement. And we needed to build capacity in doing that. So first of all, our approach was to recognize that the community itself has institutions and structures within that ought to be reinforced, particularly the Black media and the African-American church. These are institutions that have served us down through the years and continue to have to be able to serve us, but we ought to intentionally create more strength in those institutions in order to accomplish our best outcomes. So the first thing we did, I reached out to you, my brother, recognizing your insight news and your multimedia kinds of engagements and your historic commitment to our community and the narrative. The narrative is critical. We've got to have the right narrative. You're our storyteller. So in addition to having the partnership with you and you, thank God, moving into the modern era with social media and whatnot, uh, uh, b- confirmed with these town halls. But we also then said the black church. The black church is critical now and going forward. That's our most critical tool here. So out of our ecumenical network of His Works United Churches, we recruited some spiritual and community leaders whose ministries are physically located in the corridor that is 252 I-94. And if I can just kind of cite for you the 8 that we have at the table.
Please, absolutely.
Yes, we have Javonta Patton, who is the pastor of the Wave, Leslie Hayes and Sarita Oduniyi, who are elders at Liberty Church, Gaither Robinson, pastor of Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church, Pastor Rosina Fuller of Good News Baptist Church, Superintendent McKinley Moore, who's a pastor of Jehovah Jireh Church of God in Christ, Hortense Jones, who's a lay leader at New Salem Baptist Church, Dr. Francis Tabla of Ebenezer Community Church, and Bishop Richard Howell of Shiloh Temple. Now that's our leadership council, and again, their churches, their ministries are on the corridor, and so we understood with them we needed to position ourselves to bring more awareness of issues to our people, create tools that would allow engagement and more community capacity.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane here on KFAI 90.3 FM and across the web on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Today's program is a special town hall forum on Stairstep Foundation's partnership with the Minnesota Department of Transportation to connect with African and African American residents regarding transportation improvements along the Highway 252 I-94 corridor in Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, and North Minneapolis. So Babington, listen, there's always a story before the story, a conversation before the conversation. So, what is the backdrop of this work that we're doing, this collaboration that we have with each other and with our community and with the department? I mean, give us a story that allows us to contextualize this work from a variety of perspectives, including historical, cultural, political. Let's take a deep dive into this, Brother Babington.
Okay, Al, let me ask you this. I have 4 of our leadership council that are with us today. Is this when we can invite them in?
Perfect timing. Yes, absolutely. Bring them on board and introduce them when you.
I certainly will. I can introduce them before their faces pop, or I can introduce them and hope that their faces pop soon. But in any, let me just say, we have
Introduce them, yeah.
Javonta Patton, who is the pastor of the Wave.
Hey, what up, Mary?
Waving at us, leaving Al. Okay. We have Pastor Rosina Fuller of Good News Baptist Church. We also have Nini
Good afternoon.
Holly, who is one of the elders, lay leaders at New Salem. And we have my distinguished brother, the Gaither of Robinson, who's the pastor of Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church.
Did you say Gaither Robinson or the Gaither of Robinson?
Gaither of Robinson.
The title. Okay, so
yeah.
The man with the crown.
The man with the crown.
All right.
Amen. But it didn't.
Before you move on, Babington, let me take an aside here and say how wonderful it is to be in a relationship with us, with our people. And as a communicator, as a broadcaster, as a person who is used to hearing and seeing and reading and writing, I can't tell you how much I love the spirit of voice, the power of voices these men and women bring to this project, but to everything they do in community. So I think this is really a wonderful program that we're doing today. Thank you, Babington.
Thank you, Al. So you asked about the conversation before the conversation. Yeah. And so what we have been involved in is really trying to get to that notion. So for Black folks, since we arrived here in 1619, there's no way we can have any meaningful conversation going forward without recognizing that there were over 240 years that were slavery years that framed our passage through the community. But 240 years ago, that came through some sort of conclusion with the Emancipation Proclamation. But following the Emancipation Proclamation, which captured the Civil War, there was another time, and I'm just wondering, perhaps even the senator from this great state of Arkansas could tell us what that period after the Emancipation Proclamation and the end of the Civil War was called.
Yes, Babington, I can tell you what it was. It was called Reconstruction. And the time was about 1865 until 1877.
Hmm.
It was a time when the nation was trying to put itself back together. While the North and the South tried to reconnect, over 4 million of formerly enslaved individuals were experiencing freedoms and opportunities to take part in government.
Hmm.
Edwin Brooke,
Mhm.
Callan Mosby Braun,
Hmm.
Barack Obama
Hmm.
were not the first senators. Hiram Rebel was the first senator.
Hmm.
That's great information. This is Rosina. And for a brief period, PBS Pinchback was governor of the state of Louisiana. He was acting governor of Louisiana from 1872 to 1873, having started out as lieutenant governor of Louisiana in 1871. But brief is the operative term because there was a long period of backlash a few years into Reconstruction, and it seemed all the promise of progress was lost.
No doubt, Pastor Fuller, the troubles and travails that we as a people had to go through after Reconstruction made it seem as if the sun was going to go out forever. But you know what? There's an idea called resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
That's the ability to bounce back. And after all the setbacks and continued struggles, there was a determination within our people to embrace and to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a season that I call the season of freedom that began. And there was a meeting, or better yet, a movement that occurred that led to the creation of the NAACP. Anybody got a sense of what that movement was?
Hey, Pastor Babington, it's Javante Patton. And yes, that would be the Niagara Movement. In 1905, W.E.B. Du Bois and 3 other activists convened to discuss ways to deal with all of the issues that faced our community. Interestingly, one of the 4 was a man from St. Paul, Frederick McGee.
Amen. And even as for those of you that are able to see the PowerPoint, I see, Javante, that he was very well attired. It reminds me of the way you meet the public, well attired at all times. But in any event, I suspect that even this illustrious Minnesotan, Frederick McGee, he may have lived in one of the more remarkable communities, Rondo, that we will discuss a little later. But besides this growing political engagement, there was another powerful happening. Nini, what was the Great Migration?
Well, in the book, The Warmth of the Other Sun, it was written by Isabel Wilkerson, who wrote her book about the time was 1910 to 1979, when over 6 million Blacks moved from the South to the North, the West, and the Midwest of the United States.
That book, Nini, is one of my favorites, The Warmth of Other Suns. It's written by anthropologists, but it's written like a novel. And I would recommend it to anyone who wants to know more about our history and our movement in this country. But social influences like the Niagara movement and the surge of the Black population that came out of the South gave rise to an interesting African-American community development in various parts of the country. And especially in the period from the Roaring 20s through the 1950s, Gaither, have you ever heard of the Harlem Renaissance?
Yeah, I heard a little bit about it, and it seems like it was a coming together of the community.
Yeah.
And it included philosophers, poets, writers, musicians, activists, common folks, and those folks that were raising families.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the recognizable African Americans of the Renaissance were Ida B. Well Barnett, Paul Robeson, Duke Ellington, Josephine Baker,
Amen.
Marcus Garvey, Duke Ellington, Claude McCrae, Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes, Louis Armstrong, Satchmo,
Wow.
and Ethel Waters.
Wow.
And you left off one.
Uh-huh.
You forgot about Lena Horne.
Lena Horne.
Absolutely, the fabulous Lena Horne. But you know, the same period of time produced many thriving Black communities. One Black community, Booker T. Washington called the Black Wall Street. The area was Greenwood, a 35 square block section of Tulsa, Oklahoma. The city was prosperous with Black doctors and Black lawyers, a library, a hotel, and a 750-seat Black-owned theater, and the first daily Black newspaper in the state. Even though the state of Oklahoma had only 2 airports, African-American families in Greenwood owned 6 planes.
Wow. Wow. You know, that's amazing, that period of time. And I think we obviously have many prosperous folks that live in our communities today. But I wonder if in Minneapolis, St. Paul, I wonder even if now our families own 6 planes privately. I wonder. Greenwood was remarkable. But Javante, are you a plane owner?
In the future.
In the future.
Yes. I haven't manifested it yet, but right now I own a seat with Delta.
But you know, unfortunately, this extraordinary progress of Blacks in Greenwood wasn't well received. And there was a race-based incident in downtown Tulsa that spilled over into an 18-hour attack that destroyed the area. And there were actually planes involved in the attack. Destroyed Greenwood, left hundreds dead and maimed.
Well, Greenwood wasn't the only thriving Black community of that era, Babington. You know, you've heard this. We hear it, the phrase, remember Rondo. And that's a statement of pride associated with, uttered by many of our brothers and sisters in St. Paul. Remember Rondo.
Remember Rondo. And you know, Al, Rondo, the neighborhood, really then and now runs roughly between University, for those of you that are aware, on the north, and Selby on the south, and between Rice and Lexington. And in that area, African-American churches, businesses, and schools set down roots in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, created a very strong community.
Absolutely. I'm from the north side of Minneapolis, but I've always heard great things about St. Paul's. Rondo's neighborhood ran roughly, but a lot of Black families were upper middle and middle class, as well as working class. Integrated schools such as Central High School, Maxfield Elementary School, and parochial schools created a relatively high level of education and literacy among minority residents. The openness in turn attracted Southern Blacks who faced stark racial prejudice and violence. So it was a good place if you was from the South to bring your children for a better life and education and well-being.
You know, several organizations arose to meet the growing community's social needs. The Holly Q. Brown Community Center provided human services and gave African Americans a place to meet and socialize. You know, we all like to socialize. In 1928, the Credit Fund Social Club began to offer social and recreational space for young Blacks. It created a food cooperative and a credit union that helped residents finance their homes and educations. And it's so funny because I still talk to people in St. Paul whose parents were a part of passing down their homes from generation to generation. The Sterling Club, founded in 1919, was a networking association for African American professionals who were often excluded from other professional groups, but they still exist today and they still meet on a regular basis.
Amen. The Sterling Club. You're right. You're Absolutely. Right. You know, as the Twin Cities grew in the late 1930s, commuters and city planners I'll say commuters and city planners
Mhm.
began to call for a highway to link downtown St. Paul to downtown Minneapolis. Now, the thinking and the planning moved forward. And at the close of World War II, city engineers chose St. Anthony Avenue as the route to advance this commercial progress. That street ran between University and Marshall all the way to Minneapolis.
Mhm.
Now, in 1956, the Federal Highway Act was passed, and the funding required to create a freeway came into view. Now, the planning had already determined that this route would go essentially through the heart of Rondo. Well, when the funding was identified and the project then went into high gear, community resistance came forward. But take notice now, 1956, when general public awareness arrived, was 20 to 25 years after the seeds of the plan had been put in place.
Mhm.
So Reverend Floyd Massey Jr., Timothy Howard started the Rondo St. Anthony Improvement Association. They protested the route. They advocated for threatened property holders and for assistance for those who'd been forced to move. But as the old saying goes, it's too late to close the barn door after the cows are already out. Even though they were late to the table, community action was able to bring some changes, but the energy of the plan made much earlier had created momentum that could not be stopped.
Mhm.
Rondo got divided. The same story is told in Detroit, Michigan. The same story in North Minneapolis.
Mhm.
Various places in the country where the Federal Highway Act and the need to create these structures ended up to the detriment, at least short term, of our communities.
Mhm.
Whether it's Greenwood in Tulsa or Rondo, whether conflicts are born out of racial conflict, misuse of power, protection of privilege, or inadvertent developments, only possible because we're not at the table. We owe it to ourselves, to our futures, to intentionally lend ourselves to strategic development and intentional participation in the planning and the implementation of our future. That's what this is about. That's why we have gathered together. That's why we continue to be involved and are grateful
Mhm.
for the opportunity with MnDOT to be at the table, even on this project, Highway 252, I-94. Quite honestly, even as we're here now, the shovels on that project for the changes that may occur probably won't happen until 26 or 27. So we are 3 to 5 years away from that. But you know what? We're still late. We're still late. And from this should come a new consciousness on our part that organic growth is one thing. And we can feel good about that if we see organic growth in our backyards until all of a sudden we realize, hey, where did these weeds come from?
Mhm.
Organic growth is great, but intentional, thought through is much better. And in these complex times, it's a requirement for us. So Al, what I'd like to do at this point is to, first of all, just see if we have absorbed the meaning of that which has occurred. And I don't know if any of our leadership council may just have a sense of wanting to put a tag or a commentary on just what we've talked about so far, the why, if you will.
Well, before we do, Babington, let me do this. You know, I had a couple other slides to share if there is space for them, but I think for those who are watching on Facebook or YouTube, it might be cool just to put them up and have that be part of our thinking and talking as we go forward. One of the slides talks about 5 Black towns destroyed. So one of the things that we have to be cognizant of, reminded of, is that the environment has really been vicious, and that no matter what our aspirations and aims have been, as often as not, we've met massive resistance, but we also have demonstrated a powerful resiliency. And our aim today in this conversation is to speak to our capacity. There's another slide that shows the outcome, the consequence of Black Wall Street. You described it as a beautiful and powerful, successful, productive community. After this incident, the Black community was actually bombed from the air, and people rounded up, killed. They called it a massacre. And so we also have a picture here of sort of looking at the highway that we just talked about here in Minnesota, I-94 coming from Minneapolis to St. Paul. And I found it interesting that there's a picture of civic leaders holding up the Interstate 94 sign. And what's so clear about that is that they're all white. We're not in the picture. We're getting moved. We're not at the table for decision making. So, Babington, I think that's why this conversation is so critical, and why it's so important, and why we want to continue to shift, create new narratives about our role, our responsibility to provide leadership and direction in all elements of public and community life. So maybe others want to jump in there, but that's my take of where we are. And I think this is, again, a great experience that we're having.
I don't want to preempt, but anybody have anything they want to offer?
Well, I think that picture is very important because it affects our lives every day. And I know this is cliche, but if we are not at the table, then we're on the menu. And so I see this not just as a responsibility, but an opportunity to care about the ways that folks in our community and every generation, the way that our grandmothers and grandfathers get from point A to point B, to care about the school systems, to care about local businesses. So I just see this as an opportunity for us to have a voice and to have a say in our future and our destiny today. And I think to be mindful that this will affect my children and my grandchildren. So I'm excited about the opportunity to be involved, and excited about MNDOT recognizing the need for all voices to be at the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to, Javante is all of you are intentionally at this table. All of you are intentionally at this table because you represent influence. You're influencers. You have folks who follow you. to use the modern terminology, I haven't a clue if I don't think I could get a parade going on that level, but you are a folk who have influence, and Javante I call out particularly because he has a reach into the generation that is current. And we are we're working together with him. We will be working together with him to do some unique ways of reaching into that. But Javante, I just want to know what's on your heart.
Absolutely. I think this is great. And once again, thank you for including me on such a conversation like this. I actually made a post today talking about millennials and how a lot of churches or organizations, they consider them youth, but millennials are 26 through 41. They're full grown adults. We have lives. When we go to court, we're in the dark. When we go to the bar, we're in the dark. We go to the doctor. There is nothing youthful about it. And most of the time, what will attract us if you got something for our kids to do? There's some millennials that are even grandparents where it's like, oh, you got grandkids, got it. So I'm happy to be in on the conversation because 26 through 41 is a huge age gap that are using the highways. I think anybody after 16 should be a part of this conversation to a certain degree because this is something that affects what they do every single day. So I'm very grateful to be a part of it. And it's kind of like this whole entire world that's planning for me that I'm not involved in. And so to be involved and to make it multi-generational, I think we can really get some great things done because now it's not just from one angle up here and an angle from down here. Everyone has a say. And I think this makes our world better for our children and all people of color and not of color.
Amen. Amen. Nina, you got anything on your heart?
Again, I am grateful to be at the table. I think the conversations over the past almost year now has been enlightening. It made me better understand some of the city planning of road construction as well, that it doesn't just happen overnight, that it takes some planning. And planning is being prepared to make ready beforehand for some purpose or another. And so, I looked at that definition yesterday and say, okay, somebody is planning and preparing for things for our community that we're not aware of and always made aware of, especially like with the blue line or the green line, whatever's coming through. Housing, we have not only road construction going on, and when we're talking about the 94 and the 252 corridor, but we have a number of large apartment complexes that are coming into the inner city that is also going to crowd our roads that they have now made smaller. So it made me take a look at things a little differently, being at this table. And so once again, I am also grateful, and then giving other people information and say, I'm on the Get Out to Vote campaign. Well, why should I get out to vote? Well, because people are making decisions for you that you need to be aware of. So that's what this has done for me.
Amen. The distinguished senator from the state of Arkansas. What's on your heart, Senator?
Well, I'm thinking like this. I thought about something that I don't know if you were aware of it. I like the historical part that you put in there about Rondo. When as a sharecropper growing up, I was told, don't go to Rondo.
Wow.
Wow.
Are you literally this Rondo?
Not this Rondo. There's a Rondo in Arkansas.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. Elaine. Don't go to Elaine.
Okay.
They never said why. They just said, don't go there. There was a great massacre there back in the early 20s because they wanted to unionize and organize and get better pay. And now here we are, several cities destroyed, a whole community rearranged, and all we could do was just sit there and watch it happen. And now we got a chance to say something, and most folks don't even realize what's going on. You made mention of the blue line. It's coming right by my front door, and I didn't even know it was coming through.
Wow.
I found out just merely by accident. And when I went to start asking questions, I found out it's going to affect my property value and everything in a negative way, not a positive way, but a negative way. But it's already been in the works for years. I thought they had dropped it, but I found out they didn't.
Aaron, as we've said a couple of different times in a couple of different venues, the intentionality of MNDOT in terms of this particular enterprise, I'm very appreciative of. And I think that it is potentially a model for other things. But I want to just pause here and ask if you want to weigh in some ways.
I think, everything everyone said here and your great stories, really interesting today. And, everyone's talked about how it's important to be, involved now, and that, you haven't heard about things happening. And, it's not until shovels start, turning dirt that sometimes people find out that something's happening. And, in what we go through, that's often too late. So I think it's great that we have people at the table at a time when we can talk. There's a long time till decisions are going to be made, and we have still years before some decisions are made. And so we have a lot of time and opportunity to shape this project so that it really benefits the community and it benefits everyone. And so I'm just really grateful that, we have all of you at the table and really interested in, the conversations that we have going forward.
So, Aaron, could you, one of the things that Al and I talked about before, we've talked about it together, is the process of things. Right now, our leadership council got some exposure to the first draft of the environmental health assessment, and of course there's a one to come, and I think we'll probably have a town hall around that maybe in November, or we're working that through. But could you talk a little bit about, the EHS, EHA, and the EIS, and just some of the structure things going forward?
Sure. We have a lot of processes in our world, sometimes, unfortunately. But we're trying a new one this time, and it's called the Equity and Health Assessment, so EHA. And really what that is kind of an intentional process, or kind of group and body of work to look at how the project really impacts people's health and equity in the neighborhood. And so collecting this information about, what are the priorities for the community as far as equity and health go, and how are the different, elements and alternatives of the project that we come up with, how do they impact that? So, a lot of times in the past, we really look at projects kind of from a transportation lens, and, how does it help people move from A to B, and we really want to bring more voices into that conversation about the things that kind of go beyond transportation. And not everything that is equity and health is something that we can necessarily address with our project, but sometimes we can help work with our other government partners to make it more of a priority for everyone. So that's really what the equity and health assessment is about. That is running. That is a new process. So that's something that's it's a pilot, and it's brand new for us here in Minnesota. That is running kind of in parallel to this environmental impact study process that we're going through. And that is something that's been around for a long time. There's a very defined process for how we go through that. Right now, what we're working on with that process is, we've come up with, I talked about earlier about, what are the problems that we're trying to fix from a transportation standpoint. And we've come up with, quite a few different kind of concepts or ideas for how to fix that. And so right now we're working on, kind of figuring out which ones we think would best fix those problems. And as we move into the early next year, where MnDOT is going to come out, with recommendations on which ones that we think we should move into that next phase of that environmental impact study. And so, when we get to that January timeframe, it's going to be really important, to engage with the communities and get their input on the recommendations that we've made, because we might have gotten it wrong, and we want to hear from the community if we've gotten it wrong. Maybe we got it right, and we want to hear about that too. And maybe there's some things that we need to adjust. So, and that's going to be a really important time to kind of really interact with everyone in the community. And I'm hoping before that we can really interact with this group to figure out, what is the best way that we can get as many people as we can at the table. After we get through that, then we have, still after that, a couple more years of whittling things down until we get to the point where we have kind of a final option.
Mhm.
Let me break in, Babington. I'm Al McFarlane. You're listening to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Today's program is a special Stairstep Foundation Highway 252 I-94 Town Hall. Stairstep working with a leadership council and Minnesota Department of Transportation to create awareness, community engagement, to mobilize African and African Americans to both understand and articulate their interests, their preferences around the planning associated with the development, the repair, improvements for the I-94 Highway 252 corridor that goes through Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, and North Minneapolis. Babington, on several occasions in our planning and with the Leadership Council, you've always thrown out, and I appreciate you for this, you'd raised the question, what is planning? and challenge us to think about it. And, each time I have listened, but have also gone straight as I would to the dictionary to get a dictionary definition.
You and Nini.
That's the business I'm in, right? So I just pulled it up right now again, and I'm looking at the Wikipedia definition. It says planning is deciding in advance what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and who should do it. And what I love about what we're doing now, Babington, is that you are calling our community to be intentional and planful. And planning is not something for just tomorrow or the next day, but the planning you're talking about is generational, intergenerational. And I think that's wonderful. And you've also talked about the kinds of planning. In particular, you talked about general operational planning, but you've also mentioned strategic planning. And maybe you want to have that discussion. Why do you bring it up all the time? I think it's an important conversation. And for me, Babington, just to hear our voices speak this into the airwaves is fait accompli, mission accomplished. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask our dear sister Rosina to opine, if you will, on this planning notion and the strategic nature of it and the import of it as you see it.
Well, to me, to be strategic is to be intentional about what it is we want, what it is we'd like to see accomplished, and when we'd like to accomplish that thing. So to be strategic is to be intentional. And we're being intentional, in my opinion, even with this town hall in terms of getting the word out to our communities and to connect with MNDOT, to connect with the Black churches, and to connect with the Black media. And I think that strategic and being intentional is very important. I remember being in a meeting a couple of years ago about reaching out to the Black community. And I said in this meeting, and I asked them, what ways are you reaching out to folks, specifically North Minneapolis? And they weren't using Insight News. They weren't using the Minneapolis Spokesman Recorder. And so I just think being strategic means taking aim and then executing. And so if you're trying to include the people in North Minneapolis, those are great avenues, but also just basic door to door and gathering where people gather, like the Black churches, even Cub Food on Broadway. I mean, there are places where we gather and we get together, and those are good places to get the information that people need in terms of how to get involved. That would mean, making sure that we have links in our promotional material, making sure that we do phone calling, making sure that we make the announcements at our church, but also get the information into people's hands and onto their phones and into their emails. So that's what I think about, utilizing Facebook, and the other social media outlets purposely. And to let people know that this is not some random idea and some random thing that's going to affect someone else, that it is actually going to affect the way we navigate our neighborhoods and our community for years to come. So for me, that's when I say strategic, I'm talking about coming up with a strategy to do those things, to keep us at the table, to get us to the table, and to make sure that we speak up when it's time to speak up and to say things. And I also am, as a historian, I'm interested in documentation and data, making sure that we know that people are coming, that their voices are being heard, and that this is not another rondo where people are talking, but the decisions have already been made.
Mm-hmm. Nini, what's your sense of how far out people should plan?
Oh, at least 5 to 10 years. I know even sometimes longer, 20. As being a single parent, and planning for my girls to go to college, making sure that their grades were together, making sure they knew what path they wanted to take. It took some time. It wasn't overnight. So I do believe that you have to plan far enough in advance for the generations to come. So like with Javante, planning for his little girls right now, because what we see today is not how the community will look by the time that they grow up. So,
So, and again, you mentioned Javante. Let me throw this notion out here. This young man is pretty far-sighted, it seems to me, as I observe. I was called into task, Javante, by Bobby Joe Champion, because in some event about a year or so ago, I mentioned, well, I'm going to make sure I have my VCR ready for the game. And, okay, fine. I prefer sedans, but they don't make them anymore. You have to buy SUVs. I mean, things are changing, Javante.
They are changing. They are changing drastically.
And I see you operating in the arena that you do, in the entertainment arena and the recording, drastic changes. How do you approach the notion of planning in that regard? How do you see that?
Babbington and Javante, before you do that, take a minute for people that don't know the work you do to give them the elevator speech on the phenomenal work you're doing as an artist and as a leader.
Got it. Well, I am a singer for a living. That's how I make my income. I sing. I'm a recording artist, and then on the side, I lead some community initiatives. Normal guy. I live on the north side, born and raised. So this is my community. I'm not like a move-in person. This is like what I come from. The house I came from the hospital in is around the corner from the house I bought. So this is my community. Planning is very important. For me, what helps me to stay on my toes is I like to see what like the generation under me is doing, because it doesn't mean they're always incorrect. They can actually be ahead of time. I remember when VCRs was a thing, and my mom would always tell me, get up and work that VCR for me, because it was something that it was just my generation. I just knew how to use it. It was normal to me. And I think if we always involve the next generation, what we feel is futuristic is normal to them. And it just creates that bridge so that we're not behind, but we're also knowing that wisdom is not an age thing. It's an information thing. And so that's what I believe planning is important. Why it's important.
absolutely.
Reverend Dr. Robinson.
Yes, sir.
You have, again, you are someone that I have seen over the years be ahead of the curve in thinking through things. And as a pastor for years, and the way you continue. Pilgrim Rest is celebrating 99 years?
We just celebrated our 99th anniversary.
Yeah, hallelujah. So just to be around, to make it through, there has to be some foresight involved in that. Do you have any gems to share with us on the notion of planning?
Well, the planning that took place that got us here was primarily because of the old settlers that just wouldn't settle for what they considered to be second best. And they kept working until they achieved the goal that they were trying to, which was to not only be in that location, but to have the kind of building that they wanted to have. If you notice that building, one of the things that you would notice about it is that the way it looks, it might look familiar to you. At one time, years ago, that was the school in Osseo. It was a one-room schoolhouse that was brought to North Minneapolis, first by Hope Lutheran Church, and then it was sold to us when they built their new building that they're still in. And we have put it together, they put it together. And when I came, my orders from the trustee board was help us to go forward. And that's what I've been trying to do, and I'm still trying to do. I'm still learning. You talked about VCR. I got a VCR. The thing just won't work no more.
But call Javante. He knows how to work them.
I may be able to help, but your TV may be so futuristic that it may not.
Right.
Yeah.
That
Well,
part right there.
I do have a new TV.
Sorry, Al.
Well, this is so rich. I'm so enjoying this conversation. And I want to take a second just to think on this thing about planning too. Planning, and all of us are absolutely correct in my view that planning should look into the future and maybe well into the future. And I'll go up on that. I think part of planning, and this maybe takes us into the spiritual realm, our mission as believers is to look into generations, both past and forward, and to do work that we know takes a lifetime, maybe several lifetimes, right? But to do our part right now, to be the very best human beings we can be, and to be servants of what is right and what is good. And I think that us being together, working together in our churches, our neighborhoods, our professions is setting the example. We're establishing the model for civic engagement that we can apply in every other realm of endeavor. I think this is the relationship between the Black church and the Black press is historic, undeniable. We've as community relied on both to both give us the knowledge, wisdom to pursue being, productive in community and society, but also to articulate and protect our interests to ourselves and to the world. So I think that having the opportunity through Stairstep to work with the highway, the Minnesota Department of Transportation, to involve businesses like McFarlane Media, Insight News, and to involve the pastors and church leadership in creating a vocabulary in the community, a vocabulary that allows us to spell success for ourselves. That's what I see us doing. And that's what I want to thank all of you for, both your leadership and your commitment to service, because it's critical. It really is. We're going to wrap up in a couple of seconds, but Babington, I want to give you the last few minutes here. We've got about 3 minutes. And thank you for being the drum major, moving our community forward. Babington?
No, I want to again say what you said earlier, and that is how much I appreciate this team. I appreciate so much. I mean, I could get emotional because this is so serious that we engage our community and give them a different model that doesn't have us always rushing up late and say, "Hey, what's happening here?"
Mm-hmm.
It's a little late. It's a little late. So how do we achieve the dream? How do we have the dream, and then let's work to achieve the dream? And each of these pastors and lay leaders and those that are other parts of the leadership council are rippling this out. So it's a powerful thing to have the influencers get the message that they might share it forward. And that's what this model is about. And so again, let me just thank each and every one of you for who you are, what you've already done and what you're going to do. And thank you, Al, for the mechanisms that you have created that allow us to radiate the word.
Well, let me just tell our listeners and viewers, we want you to be part of this process as well. So you can come back and watch more of this, take notes, share it to your networks, like it, and bookmark it, earmark it, and let people know we're having this conversation. This is going on. And join us as we continue to work in community. With that, a final thanks to you, Alfred Babington Johnson, Stairstep Foundation, to Reverend Gaither Robinson, to Pastor Rosina Fuller. Is that correct, Fuller?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And to Sister Hortense Holly, thank you so much for being here. Brother Pastor Jovente Patton, thank you so much. And Aaron Tag, thank you.
He messes up the beginning of it. I mess up the end of it. We're going to get it right after a while.
It's okay. It's Javante.
Javante. Okay. There we go. Listen.
Aaron, thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Aaron.
All right. And I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Thanks for the 252 I-94 Town Hall Forum. We'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye.